Thank you. I was an over-optimistic leader. And what I mean by that is that I over-relied on optimism in my leadership approach. I over-relied on positive thinking. And now you might be saying to yourself, how could someone over-rely on positive thinking, right? We tell ourselves all the time, keep thinking positive. An interesting blind spot occurs in emotional intelligence for some leaders when they overutilize optimism. We avoid negativity and those people that present it to us. The effect is that we leave those people behind. And I have to admit, every once in a while I still slip back, especially when I want things to work out really well. I like optimism, don't get me wrong, and I love positive thinking. But I think sometimes the pendulum swings too far. And what we really want is balance in reality. I'm reminded what Christopher Peterson and Lisa Bazio share in their book, Health and Optimism, is that optimism is not an exercise in fantasy, but a reality-based belief system. I like that, a reality-based belief system. As a leadership coach, I've come to rely on a method or a technique that allows me to suspend judgment temporarily. Let me share a little bit about that with you. We have the positive-negative dichotomy. Good, bad, right, wrong. Those are immediate judgments. And that circumvents the ability to fully process emotional responses. If we temporarily replace the positive-negative, good-bad dichotomy with an anabolic-catabolic dichotomy, it allows us time to fully process. Those terms are borrowed from biology, where anabolic means building or constructing, an additive process, and catabolic means decoupling, deconstructing, a subtractive process. Neither is good or bad until we apply it in context. So it allows us, when considering emotional and psychological energy, to suspend judgment temporarily, digging deeper into those emotional responses. This simple concept really helps us uncover some of our own blind spots. You know what? Judgment's important. Knowing if something's good or bad or dangerous is very important. Evolutionary science suggests that we are naturally inclined to a negative bias. And this probably has rewarded our species as we've evolved. Imagine our prehistoric predecessors walking through the jungle or the forest or wherever they were in their environment, and they come across a brand new creature, never before seen, and it's big and it's hairy and it has teeth and it has claws. And they approach it with, I bet he's friendly. I'm going to see what that's all about, right? Only to find out that their first encounter with a lion or a bear or whatever that beast was would be their last. So having that negative bias really does help us survive in the world. But I wonder, as we continue to evolve, how much avoiding negativity is helping us or not. I want to share a little personal story with you. In my early career, I took a position as a quality control technician. And that job is full of judgment, pass, fail. That was ultimately my job, was to say, is the product in spec? And if I did my job really well, I didn't have to worry about the customer doing that job, finding out if the product was in spec or not. But every once in a while that happened. Every once in a while a customer complaint would come in. And so I got to be part of that complaint department. And I say that now, I got to be part of that. That was an opportunity. But then I came to a little fork in the road and thought about Yogi Berra's wisdom. He shares, when you come to a fork in the road, you should take it. And I think we usually think about that statement as any action other than inaction is good. I think Berra's wisdom was suggesting that when binary thinking presents itself, we have the ability to make a third choice. There's a great spectrum of gray between black and white. So at that time, I took the opportunity to see those complaints as potential gifts, as indicators of what might be wrong with our product and listened fully to those complaints. And those became opportunities for product improvements and absolutely satisfying our customer. It could have been easy to avoid that negativity. We often think optimism is the answer, that we just need to think positive or keep thinking our way to a positive success. The Gallup Agency, in their recent book, First Break All the Rules, they were seeking to understand what was the difference between good leaders and excellent leaders. The overarching answer is that they humanize the experience and make their followers feel wanted and important. But digging a little deeper into, I think, 2 decades of data, almost 1 billion data points from the Gallup Agency's polls and surveys on leadership and employee engagement, they learned something very important. Excellent leaders knew when to give up. They knew when to give up for themselves and for their people. And the key to that was identifying real talents, not positive thinking their way to success at something they weren't so good at. They would identify their real talents for themselves and the people that were following them and optimize those talents on the team. They really had a realistic perspective there. Ken Robinson, fellow TED Talk presenter, educator, and author, shares that there are 2 kinds of people in the world. Those that split the world into 2 kinds of people and those that don't. And while I think that's hilarious, I think there are 3 kinds of people. I think there are optimists, pessimists, and realists. Eeyore, the donkey from Winnie the Pooh, has come to represent that classic pessimist. So he's got that gray cloud over him. He kind of has that attitude of nothing ever goes right, nothing ever will. He tries, and he's pretty witty at times. But as Tigger shares, and Tigger is a high optimist, as Tigger shares, Eeyore has a penchant for gloomy ruminations. And speaking of those high optimists, like Tigger, often quite full of themselves, full of energy, bounding about with goals, but missing the cues of almost everyone around them. The good, the bad, the indifferent, just missing all of that. I think Winnie the Pooh represents the realist. He has a goal, an obsession for honey. And despite that obsession, he always has time for any of the other characters, whether they're not feeling well, whether they have negativity, or whether they're optimistic. I think the real leader in the story is a little boy named Christopher Robin. He's imagining this for his playthings, perhaps daydreaming, but providing a balanced community for his playthings to thrive and live in. You know, I have a little boy at home who's only 6 years old, and I think I've learned more about leadership from him than any other experience in my life. So highly optimistic leaders have this blind spot in emotional intelligence. Emotional intelligence is the ability to understand your own emotions, process them, and know what to do with them to be effective. That expands out into social emotional intelligence, where we can read the cues and the emotions of other people, process them, and know what to do with them to make the event or the situation as good as it can be. High optimistic leaders often are unable to process the negativity. I'm concerned with that, not for the lions and the bears in the world, but for the leaders and the people in the teams that follow them. The talents of those individuals who might be expressing some negativity through a pessimistic view often get left out, neglected, or avoided. And I think that's a shame. I think their contribution being missed is problematic. James Stockdale, Admiral James Stockdale, was the highest ranking military officer to be taken captive in a prisoner of war camp in Vietnam. He noticed something pretty quickly upon his imprisonment. Considering pessimists, optimists, and realists, who do you think fared best and most often survived these hellish camps? Well, Stockdale wanted to understand that as he entered these camps. He wanted to know that for himself so he could survive, and if there was any opportunity as a leader to help others survive. He noticed that the pessimists were defeated immediately. They had no hope, they had no strategy, and their greatest fears came to fruition, and unfortunately perished quickly. He noticed the high optimists were close behind. They had hope as a strategy, and as beautiful as hope is, it's not a strategy. They would tell themselves things like, we'll be saved by Christmas, and Christmas would come and go, and they'd still be captive. And then they would tell themselves things like, we'll be saved by Easter, and Easter would come and go, and they would still be captive. And these cycles of high hopes and being let down eventually went to their parish as well, sadly. The realists, however, were able to hold a paradox. The paradox was, we are absolutely living in hell. There's almost no human dignity, and it's the worst place in the world to be. And yet, I'm going to hold on to any shreds of decency I have and my own mindset. At the same time, they held that paradox and survived more frequently by being real with themselves. It's exactly what Stockdale did. Stockdale actually went to the place in his own mind to say, if and when I get out of here, I'm going to make this the most meaningful experience in my life, so I learn and grow from it. Not from hope, not from fear, but by being real with himself. In my work as a leadership coach, I've noticed some common traits of very effective leaders, and I'd like to share those with you today. One, they confront their emotions. They don't neglect their emotions. They're not avoiding their emotions. They're able to celebrate and sit with the difficulty and pain of a situation. They allow that full process by, two, suspending judgment, at least temporarily. They know that an answer or a solution may not be the immediate need. They understand that going right to a judgment, good, bad, right, wrong, let's do this thing, let's not, could circumvent the opportunity to process more fully and to include more people in the process if necessary. They're vulnerable. They talk about their emotional responses. They listen fully, and they share fully. Whether that's difficult or whether it's a celebration, they're vulnerable. And they practice a more advanced skill set called detached involvement. And let me explain that to you. They go into very difficult situations with the internal mindset of saying, I am going to be involved, but I'm going to detach myself from owning the other person's difficulty, negativity, or pain. That is a form of emotional armor, yet they still stay involved. They don't put the armor on and go away. They're willing to go into the exchange and lead. So now what? I'd like to ask you, as leaders in all walks of life, whether that be business, politics, the arts, religion, in families, in parenting, be vulnerable. Share your authentic self with everyone you can. Start small. Start where the stakes are low and build on that. Practice inter and intra-empathy. Start with yourself. Empathize for yourself. The emotions that you're having are valid and worthy. Start there. Process them and understand them. And then do that for others. You know, one of my proudest moments as a leader was having a particularly pessimistic, negative individual come to me and say, I never have a good thing to say, yet you're always willing to listen, and you want to know what I'm thinking. And the answer was, well, you have good things to say once we get past the initial message you share. They had contributions, they had talents I didn't want to miss. In closing, negativity is a gift. It tells us if something is wrong, it's a signal that there's potential danger, or perhaps something that we should be thinking about changing. Optimism and positivity is a gift as well. It motivates us, it's encouraging, it boosts morale, and it's that energy that keeps us moving forward. However, I think balance is the greatest gift of all. If we're able to have the optimists and the realists come together, include the pessimists and the negativity, we get the full experience that's possible. So I simply ask you as leaders in whatever walk of life you're in, please keep it real. Thank you.